I jokingly call myself the tumble detective because, everybody's got that moniker. They've got their
Yeah.
thing, the tumble this, the tumble that. I was like, I'm not going to do it publicly, but privately, I'll call myself the tumble detective. Like,
Welcome back to After the Routine. I'm your host, Rochelle, and I'm here with one of the most positive and funny humans I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, Lain Lee, also known as Coach Lee on social media.
yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, right? It is. Like, ever since we met, I've just been like, you're always so positive, and, it really comes out through everything you do.
Well, I appreciate that, Rochelle. I really do. I try, as we all do. Don't always succeed, but I'm glad that that's what comes across.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, instead of treating fear as something to eliminate, Coach Lane's work reframes it as a survival signal that comes from your brain. And that process allows high performers to stop fighting fear and start understanding it so their confidence can return naturally. He's also known globally as a mental performance coach, tumbling technique specialist, speaker, and educator who helps coaches, athletes, and families understand fear, rebuild trust, and move forward with clarity, confidence, and self awareness. So I'm so excited to dive into all things that are Coach Lain and your experience.
That sounds amazing. Like everything you just read, I was like, I want to meet that person.
Right?
That sounds awesome. Yeah, you did a great job. Great introduction.
Thank you. For people who don't know, how did you get started in the tumbling realm?
So I was the son of a gym owner for about 10 years. My mom had a small gym, and as is common with small programs, help was scarce. Qualified help was scarce. And so I would be the one to always go to, the coaches seminars and learn from them. And I was doing everything. I was wearing every single hat that's available other than front desk person and accountant. I was doing the
Yeah.
music mixing and the stunt technique, the choreography, tumbling, but it was the tumbling that really stood out to me, which is funny because like when I started cheer, I really loved stunt, but I also got into cheer because I was like, wait, like somebody's going to teach me how to flip, like I grew up in the Ninja Turtle Power Ranger era. So I was like, that's amazing. I get to be a ninja for free. And so I always had a passion and was always drawn to tumbling, but having to repeatedly break it down for athletes, I got to see what worked, what didn't work, what I liked, what I didn't like. And so this is kind of extrapolating a little bit, but I did take a break for about 10 years and had a career as a graphic designer, but then was feeling like I was just slowly dying on the computer 14 hours a day. So I was like, I have this specialized knowledge that people have said I'm pretty good at. Let me pursue this. And, maybe I could travel a little bit and meet a bunch of people and get off the computer. That was the first and foremost motivation, was to get off the computer so often.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I decided when I did that, I said, I really want to just focus on tumbling. That's really where my passion is. So that's basically it.
I love that. And then of focusing on that tumbling, you said like breaking it down. What is that thing that really is that spark for you, that passion when it
Mm,
comes to helping coaches and athletes and parents?
Troubleshooting. Love the be I jokingly call myself the tumble detective because everybody's got that moniker. They've got their
Yeah,
thing, the tumble this, the tumble that. I was like, I'm not gonna do it publicly, but privately I'll call myself the tumble detective. Like I even on
I
my
love that.
training thanks. Even on my training website that I just built, I have now athlete dossiers that I put together. And so, I'm clocking like what their attitude was like while we were talking before and after the session. I have reference videos, I have homework for them, I have challenges for them. So when I have discovery calls with parents, we spend a good 15, 20 minutes on the phone. And I'm like, paint me a picture. Tell me what's going on. And I want to know so that like the troubleshooting, the mystery, that's my favorite part because in the gaps of understanding is where I do my best work. It's where I get to go in and say, what if it's this? And there are so many commonalities, athlete to athlete. Their experience is individual. I will say that. But the commonalities between, what they experience is just because they're human. And there's only so much to our experience that would remain unsolved, like I've
Mhm.
been saying a lot lately, we're designed for survival, not sport. And if you approach it from that perspective, things make a lot more sense a lot more quickly because you're removing that emotional element from it. You know what I mean?
I love that. Yeah, I always say, I don't know who decided to throw a human, flip them, and catch them. I really appreciate that they did, but, like,
Right.
whoever decided it, I wanna know what went through their head.
My theory for a back handspring is that somebody was falling off balance and instinctively jumped instead of just allowing themselves to fall. And then somebody was like, whoa, that was pretty cool. Can you do it again? Like, it has to be. That's the only
Yeah,
explanation because who would do this on purpose, right?
and we all do. We all love it so much too.
Okay.
It
But it's
takes
so
yeah, it
true.
takes that certain type of person to get into that mindset of, "I'm going to throw someone 15 feet in the air," or "I'm gonna tumble backwards and I can't see it," right? So,
No, I mean, I have such a tremendous respect for flyers because I'm like, I've never experienced what you experience. Never. And I would never imagine it. You know, like I'm a larger guy and I'm short, but I'm larger and I'm an earth sign. I belong on the ground. I've never ever considered like even when I've been like lifted up my baby brother's now bigger than me. So like sometimes he'll try to lift me up and I'm like, put me down. Like it's not gonna happen. So I have a tremendous respect for those who allow themselves to be tossed and flipped and manhandled in the air. You know, it's crazy.
yeah, I flew for 4 years, and then I took 8 years off from the sport and came back as an adult, and I was like, "I know what could go wrong. I understand it now. I'm gonna
Right.
stay on the ground. I'll throw you, and you can trust me.
Right.
I'm so strong. I'll do the things, but I'm not going up there."
Right. Well, kudos to you for even experiencing that. But I mean, it has to be. It has to be a very unique experience. Like, I don't think there's many things that would compare to it other than like a trapeze artist, you know?
Yep, which is
That's
a
wild.
whole world of challenges and tumbling and trust in itself in that.
And if I may, discomfort. So
Yeah,
many discomforts that we experience that have to be conditioned, you know, and that's what I love too. Like you're asking me about my passion. It's the mystery of it all. And then it's educating people on, you know, this stuff that you're experiencing is it sounds kind of cruel, but it's not unique to you. It's the human condition. It's a nervous system dysregulation. And it's understanding how discomfort gets blamed for the things that you just don't understand, you know, and it's discomfort that's holding you back. So those are the probably the two biggest things that I like really love embracing in what I do.
I love that so much. And then you talked about being a graphic designer and then transitioning into this side. So I'm going to assume that you were thinking you were going to be a graphic designer going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we're like, okay, let's pivot and change. So
Yeah.
what was that like? What was that discomfort feeling of that transition?
The main thing was, you know, of course, financial, right? Because for so many years, like I had honed the way we would make money. I've been self-employed for almost almost 15 years, and so it was you know, and I live in San Francisco, or the San Francisco Bay Area. So like that's that's remarkable.
Yeah.
And so at first it was like, you know, are we going to be able to do this? And you know, my wife one year she was like, so I was just kind of reviewing some stuff, and do you know that this year part time you did better as Coach Lain than you did as a graphic designer? And I was like, okay, so maybe you know we didn't have any children at that time, and so she was like, if you want to try, try. And so that gave me more confidence than I probably would have had on my own to say, you know, I will give this a shot. However, comma, I will say that thanks to my father growing up, I learned at an early age that there is no harm in trying things, that pivoting is just a part of the process. And that, you know, if you try and it doesn't work out, there's no shame in going back or in trying something else. But a large part of my life has been taking chances and trying something that it's not, you know, Tom Cruise said it recently. He's like, it's not that I'm afraid or not afraid, it's that I'm comfortable with being afraid. It's that I'm comfortable with trying and it not working out. And that's what I was able to condition leading up to that strong pivot, which is why I always am a strong advocate of embracing discomfort daily because it will condition you for those moments. And in business, you have to be ready to pivot at the drop of a dime, you know? So yeah, that's but it was also one of those things that I had been kind of leaning toward for years as a designer.
Yeah.
There was this show on ABC back in like the early, I think it was called Flash Forward. And in the show, everyone on the planet blacked out for like 2 minutes and 47 seconds or something like that. It was a
Yeah.
sci-fi show. The people who had dreams while they were blacked out saw their future. And then the people who didn't see a future, they didn't see anything, they described it as like just white noise. It unfortunately meant that their future was limited, that they were most likely not going to survive in the next few years. And I remember watching that show and I was thinking about my career and I was like, that's what I'm seeing when I think about the future as a graphic designer. It's just white noise. Like I don't see anything specific. I don't see any accolades or accomplishments or it was just white noise. And so that
Yeah.
was kind of my wake up call to say, this might be a problem. Maybe this is not what you're supposed to be doing. And ultimately, that was what I arrived at when I took the time to really pray, meditate, and reflect on it. I was like, you never got into this for other people. You just wanted to learn how to design for yourself. And somewhere it got muddled and mixed up. So that's kind of how I arrived there. It wasn't this like epiphany, it was slow preparation that I didn't realize was happening.
Which I think is so translatable to being an athlete and the skills that
Yeah.
athletes are developing right now. Like the people that do the best adapt and change and pivot and really embrace that change. And they're like, okay, this happened, so I'm going to do this. Okay, I'm going to take it a different way. I'm going to try a different drill to go after this skill. Or
Yeah.
I didn't hit this goal, so now I'm going to push X, Y, and Z, going to the gym
Right.
and doing open gyms and extra strength or conditioning classes so that I can reach that. And I think as an athlete, those skills that you're building right now, they're not just to make a team or to get a skill or to hit a new level. It's so beyond that, but it can be really hard to think beyond the mat where
Yeah.
that goes.
And I think that's an important word, especially now. This episode is most likely going to come out during tryout season. And that's something that happens a lot with athletes and parents and coaches. Everyone's guilty of it. But the idea of, during tryout season, I'll get the panicked call or message from my mom, like, she only has 3 weeks to get her back handspring. And it's like, this is not the time to worry about that. I'm sorry. She, like I have this video I repost every year where I'm talking about if you're not ready to perform the skills safely, ask if you can be reevaluated later in the season before you like really get ramped up with competition and choreo, but don't rush safety for, in place of speed and just to get the skill. So I think what you said is huge for athletes and parents and coaches to remember, like, being able to pivot in those moments, being able to do something uncomfortable and say, "Hey coach, I'm working really hard right now, but I don't have it and I don't feel safe performing it." So
Mhm.
like having that agency that I don't really think a lot of athletes feel in cheerleading because number one, it's drilled in us so much to just obey. And, they say jump, we say how high. And then we say, look how high I can jump now. I took what you said
Yep.
and I'm doing it better. Right. And then also speed is just a part of our season, our industry. It's
Yeah.
always more, 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 faster, faster, faster. What else can you do? And so I think that's a great, like you said, it's a great application to athletes as well, that the more you're able to pivot in uncomfortable moments, not when you're ready, and to understand that the things you're working on today may not be the things you're working on tomorrow, but there are other things that you can do. I think that's a huge life skill, like you said, beyond the mat.
Yeah. This is so great. So many things that we could dive into here.
So many things.
Um, like, okay, where do we want to go next? So, what do you wish? We've talked about that discomfort. We've talked about kind of that fear side of it. What do you wish that coaches, athletes, or parents knew more about fear and confidence when it comes to tumbling, performance, all those areas?
That's a good question. I wish they knew that motivation culture manipulates them with fear,
Mm.
with the concepts of fear and confidence, that these are control tools that motivation culture uses to either get more money out of you or to harness your attention. I don't know if you've ever like paid attention to it. I think you really have to like consciously pay attention to it. Fear is mentioned in almost every TV show and movie ever. And it's because it's a motivator and it's a negative motivator, right? But it's a way to drive story and get you emotionally invested. It's something everybody experiences, right? Everybody can say that they've experienced fear. not everyone can say they've experienced true love, right? And so it's something that they know that they can use to manipulate. And it's not just in TV movies. They didn't originate this. It started in stories and fables and all these tales that have been passed down throughout time. So I wish parents and coaches and athletes would understand that not understanding fear, not understanding discomfort makes you vulnerable to manipulation. And if you can better understand what their purpose and what their utilizations are, right? Fear is a signal. It's not an emotion. It's not the thing that you have to blame. It's easy to blame, but its job at the end of the day is to be a messenger. Your brain and your body aren't misaligned. They're always communicating to take care of you, and you're training them to treat fear as the problem, and that's how you respond. So and then yeah, and then discomfort is kind of helping that whole process because, discomfort can to the brain can lead to health complications, and it can lead to have social implications. So of course the brain doesn't want you to experience discomfort. So it's gonna, if you say, "Hey, this is uncomfortable, avoid this at all costs," it's like, cool, yeah, because that was a doozy. So I think that would be what I really want people to understand, is that manipulation is so much more rampant when you give into the temptation of blaming fear, pushing it away, and trying not to utilize it instead of understanding it more.
Which I love how you say it's a signal because I think it's important to remember that that feels end.
Yeah, that's really good point to make. Very good point to make. And it's not the thing that we say that we're afraid of. It's the feeling. It's the feelings that are called into play. And for a lot of people, fear is a signal that almost always kickstarts your fight or flight response. And so a lot
Yeah.
of people don't like that feeling of, they're like, why is my heart beating faster? Why are my hands sweating? Why do I want to cry? Why am I shaking? They're like, why are all these things happening? And so they'll blame the feeling, the symptoms, instead of the root cause. Like, what was your brain trying to communicate to you in the first place? That signal was saying, hey, just pay attention. Right. And I was
Yeah.
explaining it to athletes last week, and I was like, we have this phrase, kill the messenger. And that's what you're trying to do when you say that you are afraid of this feeling. You're trying to kill the messenger to get rid of the uncomfortable feeling instead of understanding it. But yeah, that's a huge point to make, that this feeling will pass, and it's a
Yeah.
moment of discomfort that you have to experience to allow it to pass.
So, what are things that coaches, athletes, parents can do to help overcome that feeling?
It's a good question. Full honesty, stop trying to think that you can overcome it. Live with it. Embrace it. But in like micro doses, right? You don't have to do it
Yeah.
in one fell swoop. A lot of people say, "Do I have to face my fears?" Yes, you do, but your fears again aren't the problem. They're what you're blaming. You think that you're afraid of the I don't know. Let's use the fear of the dark, right? Like, you think you're afraid of darkness, but the absence of light is not what bothers you. It's the feeling you get in darkness because your brain can't see what's around you, which is a survival tactic that is
Yeah.
programmed into you deeply. So you can't see. So now you're having all these feelings. You're getting ramped up just in case something pops out, tries to attack you. That's what you don't like. It's not darkness that you don't like, because then blinking and sleeping would be difficult for you. Right. So
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, it's really interesting how easily we can jump to conclusions, and we don't realize that it's not something that needs to be overcome. It's something that needs to be conditioned, and that there are natural reactions, right? Reactions are subconscious, responses are conscious. So there
Uh-huh.
are natural reactions that are always going to happen when you experience fear and when you are trying to make sense of what it is that you need to be paying attention to. It's not trying to overcome, it's trying to recondition your response, and it's going to take micro doses of exposure to condition that discomfort so that you're comfortable being uncomfortable over time.
Yeah. Which I think is so important to be like, not just going and doing the skill 100 times is going to make you attack that discomfort. It is like drills, break it down, progress, different ways of approaching it. And like
Yes.
every athlete works differently. So finding what works for them to move them forward, I think is so key. Like those progressions, those drills, use them for everything, like your stunting skills, your tumbling skills, your even like your choreography and breaking
Yeah,
those down, right? Like that discomfort,
everything.
tackle it.
And I love that example because um, what we do as humans, we learn through mimicry. We learn that at a very early age. It's a cognitive bias that we use where we don't have to fully understand. For the longest time, I was thinking that this was something called emergence theory, which is more so all the tiny little pieces or the tiny little microsystems come together to make up a larger system. So emergence theory is more so like all of the ants that are a part of making up a colony, right? So they each have their own function and system and they come together and they make up a larger system. This is actually something that is related to Gestalt theory from Germany, which is more so that the sum is different from its parts or seen as different from its parts, right?
Yeah.
So we learn through mimicry because we have to see the whole and we just try to mimic the whole instead of really understanding the process. I was just talking to my wife about learning how to walk again after my knee injury 2 years ago, and
Yep.
I was like, we never learn how to walk as kids, as babies. We just mimic what we see, but you don't know the actual process and the nuance that goes into walking until you're injured and you have to, as an adult, now rewire, 40 years of
Which is
conditioning,
way harder to do.
way harder to do, and but it's funny because she'll say now, like, you walk way better now than you did before. Like, you look like
Yep.
you understand it now. And but that's what we do. And so athletes do that, right? Because we as athletes, we want to be able to take part in a sport as quickly as possible. You don't want to spend a bunch of time when you're like really ramped up. You're like, I'm going to go be a soccer player. I'm going to be a cheerleader, especially cheerleader. But you don't want to spend a bunch of time with theory and understanding and all this stuff. You just want to get started. And that's like
Yeah.
what makes acro sports different from traditional sports. Traditional sports, the cost of entry is so much lower. All I have to know is how to do
Yeah.
is like catch, throw, or kick a ball. That's easy. Run around a field. But with acro and with cheerleading, with gymnastics, we have life threatening skills that need to be learned in order for you to be considered like, a part of the team.
Yeah.
And so we try to learn that so quickly by just mimicking what we see. And a lot of athletes, to your point, will do this. They'll just do what they see. They'll think about round off back handspring as a whole. They're not thinking about it as the sum of the parts. They're not thinking about the bits that go into it, the deconstructed parts, and then putting those back
Yeah.
together. Going back to, what I love troubleshooting because I do obsess over the parts. And what happens is, to parents and coaches listening and athletes that are listening, you're going to struggle longer if all you keep doing is throwing yourself at that wall and then hoping that one day you'll break through it, right? The
Yep.
hoping that one day something will change because you're not focusing on the nuance. You're not focusing on, there might be a tiny little piece to your technique that is throwing the whole thing off. And if you never slow it down and take a moment to like really reflect on it, you're going to miss it. So great point to make that you really do have to take the time to fully understand what it is that you're doing.
Which for coaches who are listening and they're wanting to become better coaches, I think that's a really important part. You need to break it down, like, and actually look at like the small details. I always think of like when I work with CITs or coaches in training is helping them understand the different age groups and developmentally how they
Mm,
fall within that. Because even breaking down that, like a U6 versus a U8 versus a U12,
right.
very different like milestones. They have different social interactions. Their ability to like think about that technique is differently. And like
Yeah.
you have to be silly, right? And use silly analogies with the younger ones. I always like to say I love food with my tinies at the beginning of every session. And then every single thing I do talks about food.
I
And they all
love it.
laugh because they're like, oh, Coach Rochelle is like talking about food again. But I'm like,
Right.
okay, like this is a sushi bun and this is, a cupcake. But for them, that's easier to think about. Whereas
Yeah.
a U6 or a U athlete, you're going to be able to say, okay, use this muscle. We're going to do this. So, and I think that's like
Great point.
getting comfortable breaking down all the different aspects of what you do will make you a better coach.
I completely agree. And I think understanding that you too use mimicry more than you realize. And so, even in your explanation, now, of course, worst case scenario, we all know that there are coaches who aren't confident breaking things down. And so they'll resort to just do what she's doing. Like, you see that? Do what Molly's doing over there. And it doesn't help an athlete who is struggling in her own way. Again, nothing new under the sun, but to the individual, this is my problem. This is what I'm struggling with. So how do I fix this? And so getting uncomfortable, like you said, and getting more comfortable with the idea of like maybe ask another coach who you do hear explain something well. Ask them, hey, how would you explain this? Or hey, can you take a look at this skill? How would you break this down for her? And I've had many coaches reach out, send me videos and do just that. And when they see that it's like, there's no ego here. This is just about learning how to communicate better. They're like, wow, thank you so much. Like for just taking the time to look at that. And then a lot of them will like follow up, unprompted. They'll follow up with like, hey, by the way, I've been practicing how to say this more often. And it's really, really been helping my athletes, which makes my heart soar. So yeah, I would
Yeah.
say get uncomfortable or get comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable with breaking things down if you're not used to that. And then change your words. Try different words like
Yeah.
you do with the minis. You're like, hey, food analogies work for this level of their development. Let me keep using that. And then if it stops
Yeah.
working one day, I have no doubt that you wouldn't come up with something else. But if as coaches who are giving instruction, if we are not getting the expected results out of the athletes, it's not the athlete. Try changing your words and using different words to help them better understand because everybody understands differently. If you have a dyslexic kid, if you have a kid with ADHD, if you have a kid with autism, you're not going to be able to use the same analogies or the same explanations for all of them. You're not going to be able to say the same, like you said, say the same thing to a year 6 as a year 16. So
Yeah.
get good and get comfortable with the uncomfortable idea of pivoting and trying out different words.
Yeah. I love that. As you say that, it's funny because I did an under the sea theme for my tinies, I think last week or 2 weeks ago. And if I were to say to them, do a hollow body, my 3, 4 year olds would have no idea. They'd be like, okay, whatever. But I
Seriously,
told them, I'm like, do a surfboard. And they know how to do their hollow body as a surfboard.
I like it.
And the same thing, like Superman, they're at that age where they don't understand Superman, Supergirl, but they understand we're going to ride the wave in a Superman position or an
Yes.
out curve. So it's just little ways like that that you can make it easier for your athletes and then help them learn in different ways. Like you said, everyone also has different learning styles. So maybe the athlete that you say, hey, look at what Molly's doing is someone who is a kinesthetic learner who actually has to do it. And looking at what Molly's doing, she's like, yeah, she's doing it, but I don't know what she's doing.
I don't know what she's doing. That's such a good point. And I also lean on, I use semantic memory a lot as an example as to why it's so important to change up your words because words have meaning for a reason. And especially with English, there are a lot of other languages that I've come across that are lazy. I've heard from the people in growing up in those cultures. Like I lived in
Yeah.
Italy for a couple years as a kid, and our Italian neighbors would be like, Italians are very lazy when we speak. Like, it's just a suggestion. We don't actually mean it.
Yeah.
But with English, I think the laziness is reflected in us using words as synonyms when they're not supposed to be. And so we have specificity for a reason. Challenging yourself to be as specific as possible is going to help. And using words, well, all you're doing when you're creating these analogies and these illustrations, you're finding words that are relatable, right? And that have specific associations tied to them. A surfboard can only look and function in one way, right?
Yep.
It can only hold one shape in one position. I was even thinking when you're talking about Superman, I was like, maybe like a penguin sliding down a hill on its belly. Like
Yep.
there are very specific things that you will draw to a person's brain. Because yes, we all have our own ways of hearing, processing, understanding, and learning, but we're all human and all of our brains do the same thing. They take the fastest shortcut between thought and action is with words. So if you understand this word and what it means, you're going to execute the exact action that I'm looking for,
Yeah, which comes back to
theoretically.
being specific in your language,
Yeah,
because being specific allows you to get the message across. And the younger you work with, the way easier it is for what they process to go like 6 different ways.
exactly. Yeah. And I mean, like, you have so many, and listen, I said this to a group of coaches I was doing a training with last month. I understand. I've been there. The first thing we talked about today was my history. I've worn every single hat. I know that you have a finite amount of time with each of these athletes or with the group, and you have to wear so many different hats. I love what I do because I get to specialize. Not everybody has that luxury. Fully understand that. But if you find yourself getting frustrated at outcomes, like forget the rest of your interactions, if it's just in the outcomes that you're getting from your athletes, if you are frustrated with that, that, my friend, is something that you have to step back and reflect on. How am I communicating? Am I communicating effectively, or am I just saying the same thing and it's being misinterpreted? This is something that stood out to me when I was a younger coach, when I was coming out of the graphic design where I was coming back into coaching and I was teaching back handsprings and I was just doing the same thing that I was taught before.
Yep.
And I was like, this is not working. I was like, I'm not doing anything different. But then I went back and I was like, the girls I worked with before I took the break didn't ever really get their back handsprings or keep them or make them less
Yep.
dangerous. So I was like, something's not working. And so I literally like went in, deconstructed the process, something Tim Ferriss taught me. Deconstruction is key to understanding. So I would deconstruct it, look at it, and then get more specific with the words I was using. Cause I was like, I don't actually mean sit. And actually sit doesn't work for the function of the back handspring. And so I would go in, come up with new words that meant, if not exactly what I wanted, close to what I wanted. And but it's something that you have to be very aware of and do intentionally. And so if you're frustrated at the outcomes, take a step back and just say, you know what words am I using? What am I saying that they're not getting? And how am I saying it? And can I change it up? And then try.
Yeah.
And when you get a positive response, or you something clicks, you're like, okay, so it's time to switch up the words,
Yeah. I love that. So you did talk about kind of all of the different things you've done and wearing those different hats. So for you, what has stood out as being the most impactful way of finding and going after different opportunities in the industry?
Finding the opportunities, I'm a firm believer in playing the numbers game. Like I've had a number of coaches who are just getting started with the traveling portion, or they want to travel and work with different teams around the country and the world. And I said, look, honestly, some of the best advice I got back then when I was starting out was you just got to throw numbers at it. You'll get up 5 a.m., send out 100 emails to 100 different programs, and you'll hear back from like 1% of them. So
Yeah.
in terms of finding, you do have to be your own advocate. I mean, you do have to be smart about it too. If you keep your ears open, you'll most likely come across a lot of opportunities. But by the same token, closed mouths don't get fed. So you have to be the one advocating for yourself and just putting yourself out there. And this is why I always challenge people. Again, another Tim Ferriss technique. I always challenge people with the 10% challenge. Did we talk about this
Mm,
when we were at Cheer Factory? Or
we
you've
might
probably heard
have,
of this
but let's
before?
let's touch on it some more.
Let's touch on it just for those who haven't heard of it. So, the 10% challenge is an exercise in discomfort. It's not about the actual 10%. So, what you do is for your next 10 trips to eat out, get food, it could be drive through, it could be sit down, it could be, drive in, wherever you go and you're ordering food at the airport, whatever. You ask the cashier for 10% off of your order. And you do that 10
Okay.
times in a row so that you can, have a 100% metric. And like I said, it's not about getting the discount. It's about the discomfort that comes along with asking, the discomfort that comes along with hearing no, the discomfort that comes along with, for a lot of people, Rochelle, a lot of people don't believe they deserve it. So the discomfort that
Yes.
comes along with asking for something you don't think you deserve. And there's other people that don't like being served or don't like handouts or thinking they didn't work for some. It's just a fantastic exercise in discomfort. And it directly plays into and ties into many aspects outside of cheer. But when it comes to the business side of it, if you're going to be a consultant coach, which is how I would probably classify myself,
Yeah.
then you're going to have to, hey, ask and say, hey, here's what I do. I'd like to come out to your gym, and here's what I charge, and here's what's required. What do you think? You're going to get a ton of no's, but if that's going to be a failure point for you, then you have to consider, what am I comfortable with, and where does my comfort zone end, and can I condition that? And the answer is yes. 10% challenge is a great way to start with that.
I love that so much. So, what are other things that you recommend for coaches or athletes that are looking at becoming coaches, or maybe even parents that have found a love for the sport and want to continue it in, a different setting? What are things that you recommend for them to go get more knowledge?
That's a great question because now there's plenty more resources, I feel like. But even still, I'm constantly getting questions about this. Like, do you have an online academy or a place where we can, watch things, and other, CIT questions? And I would say for parents, kudos, first of all, because there are so many moms and dads out there who have learned how to spot and are killing it. I would say keep pursuing that, but just be a student, be a forever student, whether you're a coach seeking an opportunity or you're a parent trying to further your education. Be a forever student. Find people that you can learn from and that speak your language. The reason I bring up people like Tim Ferriss and Simon Sinek is because they communicate in a way that I gravitate toward, right?
Yeah.
They say things that make sense to me, and their reasoning and their logic makes sense. So find people, find other coaches. I put together this group I call the Tumble Team, and it's about 16 coaches that I've just met over time, and we
Yeah.
all have this chat group on Instagram, and we're always learning from each other. Like, hey Ryan, how did you do that spot? Or hey Emma, like that was an awesome post. I've never seen that drill before. And we're always learning off of each other. And I think a lot of them were surprised that me, just because I've been doing this for so long and they've seen me doing it for so long, they were surprised that I would be interested in learning. And I'm like, nah, that's what makes me better, is learning from you guys and the things that I admire about you. So I would say, yeah, in terms of seeking out opportunities, be open to it first. So be a forever student. Ask questions, even if they make you uncomfortable. Know that you don't have to have it all figured out. A lot of coaches are always worried about not being good at setting up drill stations or even knowing how to use equipment.
Yeah.
That's not a problem. I worked primarily with I did one-on-one lessons, but the all-star gym that I was doing them out of didn't have too much equipment. They had panel mats, maybe a barrel, and then they had a tumble track. That was it.
Yeah.
And then I went from that to, like, a couple years before the pandemic, doing high school lessons. And here in Northern California, cheerleading is such a disbanded, disjointed thing. Most high
Yeah.
schools are begging for space to practice, let alone having equipment. So we're using picnic tables, we're using the staircases on the sides of stages. We're using everything we can get our hands on to get creative and train. So don't worry about not having it all figured out, and knowing, like, how to use equipment. And I think the tail end of that is be creative. Arthur Ashe said, start where you are, use what you can. What did he say? Start where you are, use what you can. I'm gonna have to look it up. I'm blanking right now. I had a brain fart.
That's okay. I
But
love that though, because I think that's so important, because part of our business, we started making event guides to help gyms bring in more people into their facility. And one of the things that I was really specific about was, when I was creating those guides, to use almost no equipment,
I
because I
love
was
that.
like, it doesn't matter if you're a dance studio who has like one cheese mat, or you're a gymnastics facility that has like thousands of mats
Right.
galore. You can still run things with as little or as much equipment as possible, and being adaptable and creative, and being like, oh yeah, okay, I have 4 yoga blocks. How can I
Right.
use that to help these
Yeah.
skills? Right.
And I
Yeah.
would say too, going back to your question, this is something that is, yeah, unfortunately become more important to me since I got injured. But it was a question that I always got, even up to that time, from female coaches who are smaller than the athletes that they spot, from parents who are still learning and they're like, I don't want to hurt her or myself doing this. And then coaches like I was, where I was like, I'll put my body on the line because these athletes don't have access to equipment. So I will do that. And then that didn't end up paying off when I had a situation where the athlete did not need to be doing the skill. that she was doing. And here I am putting myself on the line for that, right? So I would also say if you're a coach, like you said, with access to a ton of equipment, learn how to teach something without any equipment. If you're a coach that doesn't have any equipment, learn how to utilize equipment without sacrificing your body. And if you can only use your body, only utilize it where it's absolutely necessary. Because there are all three scenarios are true. By the way, Arthur Ashe said, "Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can." That's why it was throwing
There
me
we
off.
go.
I said the can part too early. I do know what I'm talking about sometimes.
No, I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's so important to, like we talked about earlier, right? Be adaptable, pivot on the fly with what you need to do. So I always like to ask this question because I think the pivoting and transitioning side is kind of neat. But if
Sure.
you weren't doing what you are right now, if you weren't a tumbling specialist, what other role or in either cheerleading or tumbling or youth sports would you want to do?
Dang. I've never been asked that before. Can I base it on like my experience during this
Absolutely.
time? Okay. So I never knew that I had a passion for psychology and neuroscience. That was
Okay, yeah.
unlocked during this time. And I have put in my 10,000 hours of studying to the point where this is a flex. It's going to sound like a flex, and I'm saying it as a flex. I've unknowingly been in conversations with psychologists or
Yeah.
therapists, and I'm sitting there just spewing like I always do. And then they're like, I'm like, yeah, so what do you do? Oh, well, like I'm an associate professor of psychology at UC Davis. I'm like, God, oh my God. I just stuck my foot in my mouth. And so, that's what I'm saying internally. And I'm like, oh, so how did I do? And they're like, no, you're right on point. So I'm very proud of the work that I've put in over the years. But
Yeah.
to answer your question, I would probably be working on I guess it's technically mental health side of youth sports, because that's really a growing passion, is to help parents better understand that very chaotic relationship that arises out of youth sports in North America,
Yeah.
and helping them to better understand themselves, their athletes, the relationships with their coaches, all of that stuff. So I thought about it many times. I would probably go back to school for psychology or neuroscience or applied neuroscience, and be working in some capacity there where I'm not always physically doing that.
I love that so much.
Well, thank
And
you.
then I love to see all the fun things you're working on. And I know that you have a bunch of things going on right now. So you just launched
Yeah.
your new website, which is
Yes.
Train with Coach Lain. How
Yes.
was that?
Imagine going through something that was just arduous, but you were painfully committed to it every single day. Like you were like, this sucks, but I need to do it. So no, it was very interesting. So trainwithcoachlane.com was built using an AI app slash website developing platform. It's
Oh,
44.
that's neat.
Uh, I heard about it back in September. Talk about a pivot. I was previously using Squarespace and had only been using Squarespace for about a year and a half. And
Yeah.
Squarespace had solved the primary issue, which was having a mobile compatible website. Before then, as a designer, I'm not a programmer, so I needed they call them what you see is what you get, front facing web builder. I'm sure you're very
Yeah.
familiar with these, right?
Yep.
So I used Wix until the wheels fell off, and I started outperforming their capabilities. This was back in like
Yep.
2016. And then I moved on to a WordPress website, and there was this what you see is what you get builder called Divi, and I was using that for many years. But I would have to basically design each page of my website twice or three times, one for web, one for mobile, and then one for like tablet.
Yeah.
And so finally, in this last year and a half, paying for three websites for Squarespace, plus two storefronts, plus domain names, plus scheduling for Acuity, that was like almost $200 a month. And I was like, what am I doing? This is insane. I'm not even like really utilizing the site. So I decided to give Base 44 a try. And like I said, it was painful only because the entire site is built through conversation, which is
Okay.
crazy.
Yep.
I'm not doing what I'm used to doing, like where my training is, which is going in and physically laying things out. this was entirely done chatting with an AI builder saying, hey, you see that button that you put on this page and it looks like this static state is wrong. Can you change the static state and the hover state? And so it was very painstaking for anybody considering it. I'm going to do a video for YouTube. Like I'm going to do like my experience with Base 44 in the past
Yeah.
6 months. But I'm very happy to say that I have the best clients because I told them straight up, like they're like, hey, I get an email. I got 3 emails a Tuesday morning. Hey, I'm trying to book a lesson and it's giving me an error. And I would just tell them straight up, I appreciate your patience. I'm building this with AI. Let me go in and see if I can troubleshoot it. A couple hours later, come back. Should be working. Try again. Nope, same error. All right, give me one more second. They're the best. And they've helped me troubleshoot it since I launched it January 1st in different ways. Like I've trimmed the fat, I've added features, taken off features. But
Yeah.
yes, that is one of my main projects that got put out. Trainwithcoachlain.com is where you can book any service with me if you're a coach, a parent, or an athlete. Usually athletes have your parents do it because legal reasons. But yeah, it's been a labor of love and toiled through it to get it to where it is, and it's not done, but it's getting better. So yeah, you can book discovery calls, you can book classes, you can book travel packages, you can book one-on-one lessons. All of that is there, and then you sign up, become a user, and that athlete dossier for those parents that sign up, their athletes get that free dossier for their virtual lessons.
That's awesome. And then you have your
Thank you.
other side of it, which is your House of Claw, everything else you do.
You're the first person I've heard say the name, and it sounds so good.
It does
Yes.
sound so cool. I was like, I love this.
Thank you. So, what you don't know, or what I don't really share with people. So, Claw is a moniker I came up with years ago. It stands for Coach Lain Always Working, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm always doing something. It's grown to mean I'm always working on myself and my craft, and
I
it's
love
what I
that.
would encourage other people to do. The people that I interact with. I want you to always be working on yourself, on your craft, on your philosophy, on your worldview, on your technique, on your discomfort. Always be working. So House of Claw is, and literally everything I do is Claw. If it's music, it's Claw Studios. If it's design, it's Claw Creative, Claw Clothing. So it's something that I want to build up. And so House of Claw is where it's the first time I've done a site like this, where it's kind of the catch-all for all the stuff I don't openly share with people. It's got music, it's got
Yeah.
my design work, it's got my videos that you can't really see in too many other places. It has my speaking page for my public speaking. So yeah, that was also a labor of love, and I was working on both those sites at the same time, as well as a handful of others that I'm uncomfortable with sharing just how many, but always working. So
Yep.
yeah, that's that.
I love that. And then for anyone who has not had the pleasure of being on a webinar or in a conference session with Lane, it is one of those things that I highly recommend. Your sessions were some of my
Thank you.
favorite at the conference last year.
Thank
So do
you.
you have any ones coming up that you can share that you're going to be at?
Nothing. I just had a couple that wrapped up. One thing that I am doing throughout the year, now that I think about it, is called the Confidence Construction Cohort. It is focused for parents and athletes who are struggling with confidence, with what we in the industry call mental blocks, erroneously, by the way. But it's for those families that feel like they're at their wits' end. They've tried other things. It's a great space for you to develop and discover a new community. And yeah, it's just a great place for you to come learn from each other. It's an exhaustively extensive 6-week course, tons of information, tons of value, but you get access to it beyond the length of the 6-week course. So you can rewatch videos, you can go over the homework and the printouts again. And I have, again, it's focused on a dual focus. It's focused on parents, they get one focus, and then athletes get another one. So you can go to trainwithcoachlain.com and see when the next cohort is getting started. I'm sorry, go to House of Claw for that. houseofclaw.com, and you can see when the next cohort is getting started. You can sign up through that site.
I love that so much. Okay, so we
Thank
are
you.
down to my final question, which
Let's go.
I like to ask all of the guests. It's my last question for everyone. So if you think back to your 15, 16, 20-year-old self, what do you wish someone would have told you about pursuing this career in this industry or going after all the experiences that you've done?
Good question. First of all, 15 and 16 and 20, all three drastically different versions of Lane. Let's see. It would probably be something along the lines of be open to all possibilities because again, being the son of a gym owner, I was entrenched in instruction, right? Just all year long, all day
Yeah.
every day. I didn't have time to go and, hang out with meeting people outside of that circle. That was my world. And so I remember telling myself back then, like, I don't want to be like one of those old guys in his 40s still, like working with cheerleaders. And here I am at 42, but like, of course, like the culture's changed both inside and outside of cheer, like we can be working professionals now applying what we do inside of the cheer industry and working with people there and seeing that there's a need for things. I love what you do, by the way. Such a need for that from the professional business standpoint.
Yep.
Cheerleading is a historically unprofessional industry. I kudos to you for seeing that need. But yeah, I think that would be my advice for myself back then is like just be open to the possibility. You never know how things might come full circle. And even though I'm not a part of cheerleading, I still operate within cheerleading. So it's something that I don't know. I don't think it would have worked out any other way though, right? I think that I had to come to this on my own very serendipitously. Like I was sitting here on my computer on this beautiful spring day, maybe it was like early summer, and I was just like burnt out. So I'm sitting at the computer for no reason, thinking that I'm going to work on something. Windows open, and I'm looking out the window and I'm like, I never go outside. Like I
Yeah.
don't have a reason to. I never go outside, and I'm just like missing summer by looking at it as a spectator. And then I heard, at least this is the story I tell, because I swear to God, this is how it happened. I heard, which is very rare, there's a high school about 300 feet away from where I live. And I heard the cheerleaders practicing. Like it was echoing throughout the neighborhood. And I was like, light bulb, why don't you try that? Like just see what's out there. So I think it was just something I had to come to in that specific way. But yeah, that's the long way of answering your awesome question.
No, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. I think there are so many tidbits and little pieces of gold that coaches and athletes and parents can take. But it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Same with you, my friend. Thank you so much for having me on. And any other
Yeah.
time you want to do this, just say the word. I am down.
Perfect. Well, make sure to tune back in for our next episode where we're going to answer the question, what happens after the music stops? Thanks for joining us.